We're going to talk a little bit about leadership, and I want to start by asking you the following question. When you were recruited to come to Vivid, you'd been at Grubhub and other places. We'll get to some of those over your career. One of the things that was not in your playbook, I'm sure, was having to lead through not a slowdown, but an absolute and immediate shutdown of your business. What in the world would have prepared you for that, and how did you do it?
I'm not sure anything could have prepared anybody for, I think, what we saw in 2020 with, a global pandemic. And I would say, I think with most, it was an incredibly challenging time for, I think, everybody personally as well as professionally. And, I think when we looked at the business and what had happened to the business in the world, we were faced with a combination of no live events, right, being what the industry that we're in, but also canceled events, where customers really wanted their money back as well. And so I think we had, a multitude of tensions and challenges amongst how do you do what's right for your customers? How do you do what's right for your investors? How do you do what's right for your employees and protect them in times of challenge? And I think I've been really fortunate to have a fantastic team around me. We were able to, I think, stick really strongly to what our values were, make sure we treated every constituent the right way with our focus on the long term. And certainly, I think, we've come out of that a lot stronger than we had going into it. And for that, I continue to be eternally thankful for the supportive, I think, investors and employees that we've had and that I've had the privilege to work with.
So when that moment came there in March of 2020 and the NBA just stopped playing ball games and the NCAA canceled its tournament and Broadway shut down and Major League Baseball wasn't going to start, what was the first thing you said? Here's what we got to do. What was number one?
I still remember this day, which is, we talk about this internally all the time. When it first happened, I remember the first thing we said was, let's prep everyone because we'll be back in 2 weeks. And that certainly wasn't, it definitely wasn't how it turned out. And we still go back to, we'll be back in 2 weeks, but let's make sure everybody's equipped, everybody can work safely from home. Let's make sure our business processes are intact and we can, again, manage, customer expectations, seller expectations as a marketplace. And so we scrambled, to make sure that we accelerated this move to remote from home. Our team scrambled to make sure everybody from software engineers to customer service agents went from being in the office to having a remote setup, and then essentially prepping ourselves for at least the next 2 weeks, but that turned out to be many, many months instead.
I'm sure your IT team were among the heroes of your operation, as they were here at CNBC, as we went in from one weekend being in the office to the next week really broadcasting from people's homes. I spent months in my kitchen. People like my kitchen, by the way. We had just finished it. Thank goodness. Thank goodness it had been done. I want to go, because you mentioned it, to this idea of managing a workforce that suddenly has gone from being in locations in different cities, admittedly, but in central locations, to being distributed across the country and the world in their homes. How, and I assume many of your workers have come back to the office, but maybe in a hybrid or flexible way. Some are probably still working at home. How do you maintain focus in your workforce as the leader of the company? How do you keep your workforce focused, on task, motivated, when people are distributed and working either from home or in a hybrid method?
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, we started with the principles of how we were going to look at working in the new world. And I think those principles for us were really to do things with deliberateness and empathy. We learned a lot over the, I'd say, COVID period where everyone was working fully remote. And part of those learnings were that there are things that we do a lot better remotely, enjoying the flexibility, the ability to focus, being in and being able to be in your own space. And then there's certain things, that I think we realize too, that we just do better together. Collaboration, mentoring, on-the-job training, cross-functional initiatives. So I think as we looked at how to come back out of this and figure out what was best for us, I think we communicated and we continue to work with all of our teams. Our program is called Hybrid Collaboration, where we do have in our central locations, designated days where we say, these are great days to come back, and let's be really deliberate about what we're trying to do. And we as leaders and as a company, we put infrastructure and support around the exact things that we think work better when you're in person. And then we still retain a lot of flexibility, I think, for folks to make that hybrid movement where they can still work remote on other days out of the week.
Let's talk a little bit going back in your career and how it affects or affected your leadership style and the way you motivate people. You spent time in the military in Singapore. I forget what you were, an infantry person or a mechanized infantry platoon leader there. You also spent some time in the regimented world of the Six Sigma culture of General Electric, a company that used to own CNBC. So we're very familiar with Six Sigma and the Jack Welch way and so on and so forth. A lot of people come out of that GE incubator to run companies as you did. What did you learn? And oh, by the way, some people would say that the GE Black Belt program and the military aren't that far apart kind of spiritually. What did you learn from those two experiences that you have applied as a leader today?
Yeah, I think those are immense shaping periods of my life, and if you go back just to set it up a little bit, I was born in Singapore, which is where there is mandatory military service, but I actually grew up in New York City. So I consider myself, the hardiest of pizza snobs from that experience. And so if you can imagine growing up in a country that's different from the military that you're going to serve in, I was afforded the privilege of leading a mechanized infantry platoon as a commissioned officer. And when you do that, having grown up in a different culture and are forced to lead and really then lead others who might not be exactly have grown up the same way in the same culture, I think you very quickly learn to listen well, to really appreciate diversity, cultural differences and norms, and then of course, as is, I think a lot of military leadership, you lead by example in almost every facet of what you do that motivates folks. And then when you combine that with going out into the professional world in General Electric, I think having, again, been afforded the privilege of being part of their Lean Six Sigma program, I think that instills a very strong additional discipline and process-oriented framework with which to look at anything from manufacturing facilities to e-commerce businesses, and allows you to have that discipline framework with a strong sentiment on the voice of the customer. I think those two things have served me so well, shaped so much of who I am. And I think the other thing beyond that, when you look at diversity and everything, I was afforded an amazing opportunity in the early stages of my career to have had fantastic women leaders, women mentors, who really helped me become the leader that I am today. And when I think about leadership by example in a world where I think diversity is more important than ever, I look at what we've done at Vivid Seats, and I'm super proud of the fact that our board is majority diverse. My C-suite, my leadership team at Vivid Seats were majority diverse with 4 female C-suite members on my direct staff. I think, again, building up a team that leads by example in everything you do, from your hiring to how you execute, I just think is a critical part of leadership today.
If I had to ask you in a minute's time to give me the 3 critical things that you think are absolutely crucial to being a good leader, what would they be? Just a couple of words and a couple of phrases. 3 things.
I think the first thing is you must lead by example. I think that is the way you earn respect. That is the way you drive organizations forward. I think the second part is to commit as a team. And committing as a team means that you commit both when you're on the same page, but also in disagreement. That means you support your team members, even if you don't believe that the idea that they've chosen is the one that you would do. That's really the definition of committing as a team. And the third thing I would say is, focus on outcomes and be firm on them, but be really flexible on approach, right? I think that's where innovation really comes out. Where you know exactly what you're trying to achieve, but you foster every possible way to get there so that truly the best idea wins.